Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is episode 3 of Azure Zero to Hero series, and in this video we will learn about resources, resource groups and Azure Resource Manager overview. Not just that, I'll also share a short demo of how to use resources and resource groups on the Azure platform. Along with that, I'll also talk about industry practices and real-time use cases with respect to resource groups on the Azure platform. So please watch this video till the end. Now, before I get started with the concepts of Day-3, let me tell you that this is the GitHub repository that has the complete course syllabus from day 1 to day 25. Along with that, this repository will have day-wise folders. If you click on a particular day, you can find the notes for that particular video. The folder for day 3 is not available, but by the time you see this video uploaded on YouTube, you can find the day 3 folder. And one small request to make, only 45% of our regular YouTube channel viewers have actually subscribed to the channel. 55% have not subscribed to the channel. So please subscribe to the channel. That will make a lot of difference. Now let's get started with the concepts for day 3. So in the last class, we learned how to create a Microsoft Azure account, whether it's a free tier account that you have created using a credit card or debit card, or a student account. This is the landing page that you would see. Here there are a bunch of Microsoft Azure services. And as you click on more services, you can explore all the services that Microsoft Azure provides. But what exactly are these services? Let's take an example. Let's say that as a DevOps engineer, someone requests you that Abhishek, I need a virtual machine. So it can come through an email or a Jira ticket where a developer or a QA engineer requests for a virtual machine. They say that I need a Linux virtual machine with XYZ properties. So as a DevOps engineer, because right now we just know the user interface, we don't know how to use the CLI or the API. So I will just go to this virtual machines service and I'll click on the create button and I'll provide bunch of parameters. And finally, I'll click on the create button. Similarly, if someone requests for a database, right? Again, a developer or a QA engineer requests for a database. So what I would do as a DevOps engineer, because I just know the UI at this point of time, I'll go to the SQL databases, click on the create button, provide bunch of parameters and click on create. What will be the outcome of it? If I create a SQL database, I'll get a SQL database resource that I'll give it back to the developer. Similarly, if I create a virtual machine, I'll get a virtual machine resource that I'll give it back to the developer. So the outcome or what you are creating here is called as a resource. So if you are creating a virtual machine, that is called as virtual machine resource. If you are creating SQL database, it's called as a SQL database resource. So the ones that you see here are called as services, but what you create using these services are called as resources. And how does this workflow look like? Let's draw and try to understand, because you are just saying that I'll click few buttons and I'll get a resource back. But how does Azure understand your request and how Azure gives you back a resource? Let's try to understand. So let's say there is a user. We can assume this user as a developer or QA engineer. And this user wants to request for a virtual machine. So this user will create a Jira ticket. And as a DevOps engineer, let's say I receive this Jira ticket, which has information that developer is looking for a Linux virtual machine. So what I'll do is I'll log into the Microsoft Azure portal, because right now I just know the user interface. And I'll go to the virtual machines service, right? The one that you see here. I'll just go to this service and I'll provide some properties as per the request of the user. And I'll click on the create button. What happens after this? What happens after this is Azure will take all this information that you have provided, of course, from the properties that you have provided, and Azure will give it to something called as Azure Resource Manager, right? What Azure does is Azure gives this entire information that you have done. Like right now, whatever you provide here are just the information, right? You are asking for a virtual machine with sub resource group, virtual machine name, region. These are all the properties, or these are all the parameters. So Azure will read all of this information from you, and it will give to something called as Azure Resource Manager. And this Azure Resource Manager will create the resource that you are looking for. Now, what is this resource? Because the user has requested for a Linux virtual machine, the resource that you will get is a Linux virtual machine instance, right? So Azure Resource Manager is receiving your request, and it is creating, or it is somehow involved in creating a resource, and you can give this resource back to the user who has requested for it, right? So this is the thing that happens, and this is the entire workflow. In a simple sentence, if you want to understand, resource is the outcome of the service. So you use the virtual machine service on the Azure platform to create a virtual machine. You use the SQL database service to create SQL database resource. And who is creating this resource? That is taken care by the Azure Resource Manager. And one important information is, of course, right now we just know the user interface, but whether you are doing it from the user interface, or you are doing it from the Azure CLI, or you are doing it using the API, or any other ways that Azure supports, there are a couple of other ways which we will learn. In any of these ways, user interface, CLI, API, and couple of other ways, request goes to Azure Resource Manager only. So Azure Resource Manager is the interface between you, whether you are using UI, CLI, API, anything, and between the actual creation of the resources. So in any way, the request goes to Azure Resource Manager only, and Azure Resource Manager creates that request for you. Got it? So this is about Resource Manager, and this is about resource. Now your question should be, but Abhishek, what is a resource group? So resource group is a very important thing that you should understand, and it is very important to understand this at the beginner level so that you will understand good practices while using the Azure platform. And whether you are creating virtual machine or anything, resource group is a mandatory thing. Like, let me show you proceeding how to create a virtual machine. Of course, you don't need to know anything today, but let's go to virtual machine and let's try to create. You will see the first thing, resource group, and it has a star. That means you should provide a resource group for sure. Let's say I don't provide this and click on the review and create button. You will see an error saying that you need to provide the resource group information. Of course, I need to put all the details, but the mandatory things are the resource group and subscription. Subscription, of course, we are using a free tier account, so we have a free tier subscription. If you are using pay as go, then you will get a different subscription name. But for now, all of us who are using this, we will see free tier here. And resource group is a mandatory field. Without using this, you cannot create resources on the Azure platform. But Abhishek, what exactly it is? Let me explain. So as the name suggests, resource group is basically grouping of resources. Okay. That means Azure provides a way where you can group bunch of resources. That group of resources can be a virtual machine plus a database plus a app service. Of course, it cannot be app service, but just giving an example. So it can be anything that you use. So a resource group is basically a combination of resources. Now, the most important thing is, Abhishek, why should I combine these resources? Second thing is, how should I combine these resources? Right? Why should I combine? Second thing, how should I combine? Why should you combine? One is this is mandatory in Azure. You cannot create resources without using resource group. And second thing is if you group resources, right? You can track these resources, right? Tracking resources means, let's say there is a project called payments, or there is a project called transactions. You are working in an e-commerce company, let's say, and they have one team called as payments. They have one team called as transactions. They have one team called as UI team. And you are a common DevOps engineer for all of them. Okay. Now, these people will request for resources on the Azure. These people will request for the resources on Azure. Also, these people will request for the resources on Azure. Now, the thing is that how will you track resources for these people? How will you track resources for these people? And how will you track resources for these people? Of course, you can tell me that Abhishek, I can use the names. I will call, if they are requesting for a virtual machine, I'll call that as payments virtual machine. If they are requesting for virtual machines, I'll call it as transactions XYZ virtual machine. But it's not just about the naming convention. There are multiple things like access, permissions, security, auditing, monitoring, cost. There are a bunch of things. So if you group these resources, let's say tomorrow your manager comes to you, and let's say your manager asks you that, Abhishek, you are a DevOps engineer. So I just want to understand how many resources is this payments group using? So what you can simply do is you can go here, search for resource groups. Now I don't have any resource group, but if you create a payments resource group, then you can just click on that and you can tell your manager that, okay, they are using 10 virtual machines, 5 databases, 2 AKS clusters, XYZ. And immediately you can also understand what is the billing for that particular team. And you can see if they are following any compliance, that is your company standards or not. You can track anything if you have a resource group. So now you should understand why you use a resource group. Resource group is grouping of resources, which will allow you to track the resources of a particular project or particular resources. And that will also allow you to manage the access of that particular resource. So tomorrow a new DevOps engineer joins your team, and that DevOps engineer is working for the payments team. So simply you can go to the payments resource group and grant him the access or grant her the access, or remove access if someone is leaving your team. You can maintain the security standards for a bunch of resources. You can perform auditing, cost monitoring, all of these things if you have a resource group. Let me quickly show you how to create a resource group. So just go here, click on the create button and just provide a name of the resource group. For now, let me call it as payment. Okay. And once I explain you how, we will do it even in a better way. Right now, I just explained that we will create a resource group for the payment. We will create a resource group for the transaction. But I will tell you as a DevOps engineer, how can you maintain these resource groups even in a better way, right? So we will learn that. For now, let's understand how to create a resource group first. So free tier account, just provide the name, and if you want to create any tags, you can create any tags and just click on review and create. That's it. The validation is passed. So click on the create button and your resource is created. Sorry, the resource group is created. Now you can simply go to any of the services, go to the virtual machine, click on the create button. And when you create this virtual machine, you can see that option here called payment, right? So automatically, when you create this virtual machine will go and fall into the payments resource group. Let me quickly show you, right? So what we will do is we will provide bunch of details here. Let's provide the virtual name as test. We will use the East US region. Let's not change anything because today is our first day. Availability zone, let's keep as one of the availability zones, right? I'll not change this. I'm using zone 1, Ubuntu, architecture type x64, size. I'll talk more in tomorrow's class, but for now, what you need to do is just click on see all sizes and pick up this one here called B1S. Just click on this button and click on the select option. And that will give you a B1S virtual machine. That is under the free time. Do not pick up any virtual machines in today's class. I'll explain you why in the next class. For now, just use this option. SSH, username, let it be. Key pair, provide any random name and click on review and create. So it will take 30 seconds or even less than that. So see what Azure is saying, that it will cost you 0.8 because I have chosen INR currency, but don't worry about that. It will actually not cost you because B1S services comes for 750 hours of free time per month. If you exceed that, only then Azure will charge you this amount. And not just that, you already have this 15,000 or 13,500 free credits. So even if you exceed for the first 1 month, that will be deducted from that amount and not from your debit or credit card. In today's class, you don't have to worry anything about this virtual machine configuration because I'll explain this in detail in tomorrow's class. So just click on this download private key and create resource. So that will download the private key for you and it will proceed with creation of the virtual machine. Just wait for a couple of minutes because Azure will take time. As I explained here, this entire request should go to the Azure Resource Manager and Azure Resource Manager is working on creating that resource for you. Perfect. The resource deployment is in progress. And once it is done, you can go back, search for resource groups. And here inside the payments resource group, you should see the virtual machine. Right now, only the key value pair is created. And after a while, probably it might take 1 or 2 minutes and you refresh, you will see all the information related to the virtual machine here. Right now, you will see a key value pair, a virtual network, NSG, IP, that is a public IP. And along with that, you will also see the virtual machine. This is the touch virtual machine that we have created. Now, if you would have created a database and multiple others, everything you can track from this single resource group. So let's go here, payments resource group. And what you can do with it, as I've mentioned, you can just click on access control. If you have created, here I've just created a virtual machine, right? Similarly, if I have a database, if I have a EKS cluster, I can just go to the access IAM and I can just define who has access to these resources. I can add a particular role assignment. I can remove the role assignment. I can create a custom role. We will play with these things as we proceed with the next videos. But for now, these are the capabilities that a resource group provides you. The things that I've written: access, permission, security, auditing, cost, everything, so that you can understand about a particular resource group. Now, how to group these resources? As I've explained one example that you can group as per the project name, like I've said, projects, transaction, UI. But is this the right way to group? Actually, yes, there is no perfect way. But what I would do, like from my experience, how I have seen the industry, one of the best practices is to track as per the project and the environment. For example, payments group will have a developer environment. Let me write it. Payments team will not have just one environment, right? So payments team will have a dev environment, payments team will have a QA environment, payments team will have a production environment. So it depends on this criteria. If your organization has different Azure accounts for different environments, let's say you have an Azure account for developer environment, you have an Azure account for the QA environment, and if you have an Azure account different for the production environment, then that's totally fine. You can maintain as per the standard that I have explained. You can create a resource group for the payments team. You can create another resource group for the transactions team. You can create another resource group for XYZ teams, the teams that you're working for. But if you are a startup, let's say, and your startup has only one single Azure account, or you're performing some proof of concepts for learning on your personal Azure account, then what you can do is you can create multiple resource groups where you can say payment hyphen dev, payment hyphen QA, or payment hyphen prod, right? So you can also create resource group per environment if you are using one single Azure account for different environments. And this is also an important interview question where interviewer might ask you, how are you managing your Azure resources? So if you are working for a company where your company is capable of using multiple Azure accounts, and if they're actually doing it, then simply mention that we are using resource groups per project, where we created one resource group for the payments, one resource group for the transactions. And using this resource group, we manage access, we manage monitoring, we manage billing, we manage locking for the particular resources, security aspects, right? There are multiple options that resource group provide you. As we progress, we will learn more things. And let's say you're working for a startup, or for some reason, your organization is using only one single Azure account. Then how you handle that question is we create resource groups for project hyphen environment. So we have one resource group for payment dev, payment QA, payment prod. So this is how you explain that. And one thumb rule is that when you create a virtual machine, for example, we have created the virtual machine here called test virtual machine. If this test virtual machine is part of the payments resource group, then it cannot be part of any other resource group. So a resource and a resource group are always one-to-one map. One resource can go into one resource group only. So this is the class for today, where I wanted to explain about three concepts. Let me quickly review, quickly give an overview. Resource, resource manager, and finally, resource group, right? So what does a resource manager do? Resource manager is responsible for creating the resources. And what is the resource? As I've explained you, if you are using Azure services to create an instance from it, if you are using the virtual machine service to create an instance of virtual machine, then that instance or the output is actually called as a resource. Resource manager is the one that is creating the resources. Finally, resource group is basically grouping of resources, where this grouping can be done as per your criteria, your organizational requirements. But the better way of grouping these resources is using the project name or project hyphen environment name. That depends on if you're using one single Azure account or multiple Azure accounts. Finally, why do you do this grouping of resources? One, it is mandatory in Azure. Two, because it adds a lot of capabilities to you, such as you can manage the access. Tomorrow, if a new team member joins, you can say that this team member should have access to all these resources. How to do that? Just go to the access tab here, IAM, access control, and you can manage the access related things. Or you can go to the security tab and manage security of these resources. You can go to the policies and manage the policies. You can do the billing. I mean, you can find out the billing of these particular resources. Everything you can manage by grouping of these resources. That's why Azure has made it mandatory. Perfect. So this is the class for today. I hope you understood the concepts. If you have any doubts, do let me know in the comment section. And also, please share this channel with the Azure DevOps aspirants. See you all in the next video. Take care.